Good morning. It's 9 a.m. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. And my host today is Wendy Nicholson, who is a CUNY Leads Advisor in the Center for Career and Professional Development in the Division of Student Affairs, and is also a doctoral student at Rutgers School of Public Affairs and Administration, who has got the attention of the campus with an email she sent out. The names change, the stories remain the same. And I was saying to Wendy earlier on that this is the earliest I've ever done this show, but we both felt a sense of urgency to talk about this. We would have done it on Tuesday, but for Blackout Tuesday. And so we rescheduled for this morning. Welcome, Wendy. Say hi.
Good morning. Thanks, Hugo. I really appreciate this.
I appreciate you being on the show. You are a veteran of WLGR, LaGuardia Web Radio, and were on my show previously when we were talking about the faculty and staff of color collective. Thank you very much. I get in a lot of trouble with Dr. Bing, because I never seem to be able to get it right. But so you know a little bit about how I do this show, but for folks, to kind of learn a little bit about you, want to tell us a little bit about your background, studies, and your coming to LaGuardia and your role here at the college?
Sure. It's interesting that I just reconnected with a friend that I met when I was 12 years old, and we were at an elite private school in the city, which was a real interesting experience for me. So growing up in the Bronx, but going to school in Manhattan at an elite private school, and then going on to get my bachelor's at Tufts University in Boston. And then several years ago, getting my MPA at John Jay, and now being a doctoral student at Rutgers. But racial issues and just figuring out what's going on in the world and who I am and how we're shaped has always been something I've been interested in. So I've been reading about these issues all my life. So what's going on now is just really a part of what I've always done, and this is just sort of the next step there. So just grateful that you're giving me the opportunity to talk about this.
You want to talk a little bit about? Well, I guess the question I always ask is, how did you come to LaGuardia? How did you find yourself here?
Actually, I was at CUNY a long time ago as a sign language interpreter. I was an interpreter for 25 years, and I've literally interpreted everything from birth to death. But I was one of the interpreters at City Tech for quite a while, and then just as the world goes, I was an interpreter at Jacobi Medical Center in North Central Bronx hospitals for several years, and when I left there, I came back as an interpreter to CUNY. I worked at Kingsborough and also at Medgar Evers. And then I was alerted to the CUNY Leads position, which is, there's a CUNY Leads advisor at each CUNY campus, and we are basically responsible for preparing our students with disabilities for the workforce. And I was specifically looked at for LaGuardia because we have a large deaf population, and because I can sign, it just made more sense to bring in someone like me so that they didn't have to hire interpreters every time a deaf student needed to work with the Leads advisor. So I've been in that position for the last 8 years.
So I guess you work closely with the Office of Students with Disabilities as well.
I work with the Office of
Astrid and Johnny. And
correct. Yeah, we work together. It's different. So, most of the CUNY Leads advisors work in their disabilities offices. Up until recently, I was one of only 2 who worked in career offices, and now City College's CUNY Leads advisor also works in the career office.
All right. Yeah, because it saw you're in the B building.
Correct.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. So let's just get right into this. Obviously, what happened in Minneapolis happened. and uh, you then began writing this. And I was reading it this morning. I tried to get up to full disclosure. I tried to get through all of it and did not quite make it through the long email chain. And I'm also wondering if there's emails that I missed, because at one point that somebody referred to Patricia, which I believe was probably Patricia Sokolsky, made some statement as well, and I couldn't find that one. But and I was reading, and you were saying, like, you began trying to write this, and so I suppose you started that statement many times. But talk about it. Talk about the whole genesis of that statement and the email.
Correct. So, oddly enough, the Minneapolis atrocity was not what prompted me to write this. I mean, it's part of it, but that wasn't the acute event. Last Thursday, I was, I believe, on LinkedIn or some other platform where I was just sort of reading through information and came across the stories of the two young Black entrepreneurs who were accosted by a white man in a private gym, where they could not have possibly been there without an individualized private card, which he has the same thing, but he wanted to know if it belonged there and wanted to see what they had, and threatened to call the police. And then also the young lady here who who did call 911, saying a Black man was attacking she and her dog. And then there was a story of a Black couple in Detroit, I believe. They were recording a protest on their phones, and they were accosted by police. One policeman, began punching the woman, threw her to the ground. They tased her husband. And in reading those stories, I had the strongest visceral reaction I've ever had to any of these things that are going on. Like, I never felt that badly or that strongly about things. It's not that I've never felt it, but it was so overwhelming to me that I couldn't just sit there, couldn't do nothing. And I'm a writer. That's what I do. So I immediately sought to put my thoughts on paper. The problem was, every time I tried to do it, those feelings just kept coming back up. And it took me probably well over an hour just to write that particular article that I wrote, that actually was posted on LinkedIn first. But it took me so long because there were so many thoughts bombarding my brain and my spirit about all of this. And because I've been studying about racial battle fatigue and understanding that, that's where those thoughts went, because it is trauma. It is just this relentless, you know, going through all of these events and feelings all the time. And so I wanted to write that article. I wanted it to be framed so that folks understand the anger that people of color go through, but understand that it's not just anger. It's not just irrational, emotional anger, but it is, a part of this trauma. I mean, when you look at PTSD, folks who suffer from PTSD are going through the memories and the hauntings of events that have already passed. They're no longer going through it. But the trauma that people of color, particularly Black folks, the trauma that we experience, as we call it, racial battle fatigue, is something that we go through every day. And so, how do you heal from something that you're continually going through? But I just wanted folks to understand, look at these things that are happening. The events that I wrote about had only happened last week. All of the events that I wrote about in that article had only happened in the 2 to 3 days prior to writing the article. So then I just started thinking about, at work, that, there was no conversation about this. And you hear it on the news, and you might have some private conversations, but, at LaGuardia, there's a lot of things that we talk about on email and so forth. And I just, it struck me that there was absolute silence about this issue. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to put this up. I had no idea that it was going to get the kind of response that it did. But I needed to have I needed to say something, particularly because we're at this point where we're trying to develop and build an inclusive community. And so, how do we do that when we don't talk about the wrongs happening to a significant portion of our community? Our staff, our faculty, our students. And so, I wrote the email and challenged people. Are we going to be among the silent, or are we going to dare to do more, which is one of our themes? And folks chimed in lovely. The response was awesome.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of things there that I want to talk about. I mean, because we talked about your background and your studies and when what you do here at the college, but we left a couple of things out. I mean, except by reference to the fact that we kind of know each other that way as well. But you are also a founding member of the faculty and staff of Color Collective. And we just recently had a meeting about that where, I was kind of excited to see Dr. Seals there, our provost. I think it's the first time we had that senior of an administrator present.
Right.
And I don't know how she saw herself in that meeting, whether she saw herself as an administrator who was listening to folks that she supervises, or whether she also was there in attendance as identifying with our community, with the community. Right. I attend those meetings as well, and I couldn't listen because I had to run off and do something else. So I did start some trouble and then left, which is my way.
You're typical, yeah.
Yeah, but you're also now part of a presidential council that's focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Correct.
Which is, again, something that did not happen under President Mello, and now under interim President Arcario, is an initiative he has founded, and I think the hopes are that it's going to transition in with the new administration.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the idea is to have things in place, and so that we're looking at, this is what we are doing, and this is what we are looking to become as an institution. So the President's Advisory Council initially was just interim President Arcario bringing together some of the leaders of the groups that do a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, across campus. So it was the faculty and staff of Color Collective. It was SURGE, which is Stand Up for Racial Justice, which is a white ally group, and also the Senate Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. So you have a sort of
so the Senate. I didn't realize this. The Senate has a committee.
Yes,
well.
So actually, right. So the Senate Committee on Professional Development has a subcommittee.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is diversity and inclusion.
I knew about this. So, right.
And we have done things around the campus as individual groups, but we've also done some collective work. Last November we had the Week of Diversity and Inclusion, where each of us had a specific event that was going on, but they were intertwined and interdependent. And so the president brought us together and said, he wanted to look at how do we do something more? How do we do something more formalized? And so he brought us together and charged us with beginning to develop the strategies that LaGuardia would use to develop this inclusive campus environment. So we've been meeting since then, and we've met with him. Matter of fact, we just met with him on Tuesday about how we're trying to go forward and how we're looking at representing all of the voices that need to be represented at the college. Lots of folks do work in DEI. It could be different events. It could be coming out of a class. It could be coming out of a student organization. But how do we formalize that, and how do we get those events and those initiatives together and working towards a broader goal?
Alignment.
Correct.
We've talked about in the past.
Correct.
Aligning all the different divisions and the work that they do.
Right. It's the divisions, it's the groups, it's the faculty, because it's so much broader than just, the things that the individual events that we do, but how do we bring in our pedagogy into that alignment and our curriculum, and how are these events related to those, and with that being the broader goal of having a an inclusive and equitable environment. LaGuardia does diversity very well. I mean, you walk into a room, you have different people. That's diversity. That's
I
a
was,
numbers
yeah, I was going to
game.
say, what do you mean by we do it well?
That's a numbers game. We have students from hundreds of different countries, and we have lots of languages across campus, and our faculty and staff. So diversity is easy. It's a numbers game. If right now you and I are in a diverse situation, male, female, I'm black, you're Latino. It's diverse. We do that, but is it equitable? Is it inclusive? That's where we need to do better, and that's what we're looking at, and that was the whole point of the President's Advisory Council.
Okay. But let's go back to the email and the letter or the statement. So you posted it, and I can only imagine what it felt like when you pressed that button. I think about, because I send a lot of these college-wide emails, and a lot of times before I send them, I'm wondering, uh, you know, just before I press that button, because of how people will respond.
Correct.
And particularly IT, who isn't crazy about the fact that on the past I have certainly caused a communication storm, so to speak. uh, but then, okay, so then there were responses, and I have the chain here, and it'd be interesting to go all the way down to the I don't know if I have the exact uh, chain, but I'm trying to think about, like, how long did it take before the first response. In fact, yeah, I can't find out because I'm
It
still
was
loading.
actually it was actually fairly short before that
Yeah, I was
first
going to
response
say,
came in.
I would expect that. And interestingly enough, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but Michelle Pizzo Manukian, I think, was, a lot of times it's just like who's on the computer. There's that, and then who opens it, and
True.
then are they communicators? And but so let's talk about the response. What were your thoughts about the response as it moved through? Because obviously it unfolded over time.
It unfolded. I literally, Sunday morning, I checked the account, and I normally don't check my work email when I'm not at work, but this was something that I wanted to just keep track of, and so things were even still coming in over the weekend. But even the thread that you're looking at, you will not see all of the responses because a lot of people responded to me directly.
Specifically to you, right?
Right. And also, you don't see all of my responses. I responded to everyone who said something. I did not keep everything in the full thread, depending on what the response was.
Right.
But I just wanted each person to know that I, recognized that they made a response, and that I appreciated that. But I wasn't sure where it was going to go. But whenever you're in this kind of work, there is sort of that anticipation that there's going to be a lot of pushback. And I certainly didn't find that. What I found was faculty and staff across backgrounds, ethnicities, races, everything, where folks are just angry. So what I wrote sort of resonated. People are angry. They're tired. Why is it that we're still going through this? And people just really jumping on that last line that I put in about daring to do more or being a part of the selectively silent. It says, no, we don't want to be silent anymore. We stand with you. What can we do? A lot of folks are asking for guidance. What can we do? What do we do? We've done everything before. We've marched. We've written. We've protested. And yet here we are. What more can we do? Or maybe there's nothing else to be done because we're still going through this. But the reality is that if those who have come before us didn't do what they did, we wouldn't be in the position we are today. And so, yes, a lot has changed. And yes, a lot still needs to change. And yes, a lot needs to be done. And if we don't continue to do it, then we don't make the progress that we make. We don't build on what's been here before. I mean, in all honesty, if none of this had been done before, there's no way I would be a doctoral student at Rutgers. It just wouldn't be happening. Um, and you and I might not even be here having this conversation at LaGuardia. So there's been a lot, but yes, we have to continue to fight. And one of the pictures that kept coming to mind is a cartoon, two panels, one above, one below, where you see a man with a pickaxe, and he's going through rock. He's going through rock, and you see at the end of this tunnel this pile of gold, and he's going through and going through. The next panel, you see him turning away from what he was doing, but if he had hit that rock a few more times, he would have broken through. And so that's the kind of thing that I don't want us to do, that we give up right before we get to what we're trying to do or trying to make that progress. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that, we're going to turn everything around and we're going to have this, this great society, but there's a part that we play. And I want to continue playing that part. If I'm the one who blazes a trail for someone else to get a seat at the table, then I've done my part. I don't have to be the one at the table, but I have to do my part. And that's what we all need to look at. We can all do something. It's voting, it's writing to elected officials, it's teaching our students, it's teaching our children, it's even our own thinking, and how do we change what we do, and how do we treat people better. There's a lot that can be done. People just have to do their part.
As I read through the stream, in the beginning, it begins with remarks of solidarity.
Yes.
And folks identifying, I guess the folks, and people don't, particularly know, being somebody that does send a lot of emails college-wide. I've been schooled on the etiquette of,
Right.
like, now what I do is I put my name on the to line. I CC those folks who are, like, this morning, I CC'd you and Jamie and Chris, who are all members of what we're doing today here collectively. But then I BCC'd, the divisions, as I call it.
Right.
CCing everybody, so that if somebody hits reply all,
right,
it comes back to me and you and Chris and Jamie, but it doesn't go to everybody, because I've obviously, like I said, I've created some storms in the past with the communication system here, and I had to learn that lesson. But if somebody wants to reply to all, they gotta aggressively, they have to do it aggressively. They have to basically go into the box and type in all the different addresses. But there were the responses to everybody, and like you said, there were other people who connected with you individually. So as I was going through the thread, like I said in the beginning, it was people solidarity, right? And folks of color, folks, initially, actually, a lot of the ones I saw were people that might not be identified as people of color.
Right.
And then, there were people expressing their feelings, what you're talking about, which is this kind of suppressed, I don't know if I should call it rage, but it feels like it can be rage.
Yeah, sure.
Over what's going on, the frustration of that. And then there was, like you talked about, the people, a type of pushback. I saw a sort of some folks not necessarily on the same page, and people responding to that as well. And then somewhere down the line, as we worked through all of these different things and the conversations that those things triggered, people started talking about, what can we do, or what can you do? And there, near the end there, you actually gave folks a list, because we know about this. One of the books we talk about a lot is the Robin DiAngelo book, White Fragility.
Right.
And how unwittingly white liberals sometimes play a negative role in unwittingly in the
Hmm.
things they do, and how everybody needs to learn uh, how to be supportive, genuinely supportive, or positively supportive, rather than feigned or even unwittingly making things worse.
Right. I
Uh,
mean, it's
and by the
such a
way, it's 9:29. You're watching LaGuardia Web Radio WLGR. My name is Hugo Fernandez. I'm the host of the show What's Going On, and my guest today is Wendy Nicholson, who is a CUNY Leads Advisor in the Center for Career and Professional Development in the Division of Student Affairs. And we are talking about an email she sent with an essay, a short essay. The names change, the stories remain the same. So sorry, Wendy, I interrupted you. I told
no,
you there'd
no,
be a
quite
station
right.
break.
That's fine. This work is difficult, Hugo. I mean, there's just so much involved in it, and the reality is that even though people of color have been the victims and are the victims of racism and bias and microaggressions and so forth, we cannot alone change the system. This systemic, has been from the beginning of this country, right? We alone cannot change that. The issue that arises is that you have people who identify as allies, and yes, we need that. However, you never know for sure if the folks who are coming to you or at you are allies or spies. And that's always something that's sort of in the back of your mind, because you just don't know, because folks have done so many things. I mean, look at what's happening now. So folks are protesting because this young man was murdered by a police officer, right? And so the protests are about that outrage and anger because it continues to happen. And yes, there may be some entities who have come in with a different agenda under the guise of we're here to support, but they are causing some other things to happen, right? Now, this whole looting and stealing, like if it were truly started by an outside entity with a different agenda, what they did was give permission to folks who are now just doing it just to do it. And neither one of those are right at all. That is unacceptable. It takes away from the actual message. And that's what continues to happen. And that's why our fight is so difficult, because it starts to get co opted by others and it starts to get deflected. We need to stay on what the message is. And so a lot of the emails that we had last week, yes, there were a lot who wanted to stand in solidarity, who did not want to be silent anymore. And white people who said, I know that I could watch this and just shake my head and do nothing about it. I could ignore it, but I don't want to do that anymore, or I can't do that anymore because this is just such a pervasive problem. And so, how do we stand with you? And that's a good question. How do you stand? Because sometimes what happens is your allies come in and, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And, and then it becomes their issue and not really about what's
They
happening for us.
co-opt. They co-opt
It
the
gets
cause.
co-opted, right? And so, yes, allies, we need to learn how to work hand in hand, but sometimes you just need to be able to listen and to understand. And so these are some of the things that I tried to bring out. I didn't want the article that I wrote to be very long, but I wanted it to be powerful enough for people to understand what we go through, that trauma. And it's difficult because if I, as a young child, watch my parent, older relatives, um, change in the face of white people, they change how they interact with them, they change how they speak to them, right? That's trauma for me, because I can't understand, why are we different with someone else? Why do you, this person I see as a strong person, as a hero, why all of a sudden are you becoming this subservient person? That's trauma for me. Then, as an adult, if I have a child, I'm worried about my child. particularly if it's a black male, which I do have. I have an 18-year-old. I worry about him. That's trauma for me. If I'm watching a colleague at work go through, microaggressions and racism at work, and there's nothing we can do about it or nothing I can do, that's trauma. And so think about how that continues to happen all the time, right? It's not just at work, it's in the street, it's in the store, it's in transportation. So this is all the time. So now when we come back to these emails, when we have people who say they want to help, okay, great, help, but understand this is how we feel and this is why we feel it. This is why the protests are happening, because it's not just George Floyd. It was Ahmaud Arbery. It was Trayvon Martin. It was Eleanor Bumpurs way back when. All these names where these things have been happening again and again and again. And it's been happening primarily with impunity. The police officers involved have not been punished for it. They've not, justice has not been served. So how could people not be angry about that? So when one of those emails came down and said, oh, this should not be about color and we're all equal under God and law, listen, dissenting voices are great, but they need to be factual. It is absolutely about color. And we are equal under law on paper, except that when you think about when the laws of this country were developed, we, Black people, were not a part of those laws. They were not meant for us, right? But as we continued in this country and through slavery and after slavery, laws were made to keep us in a subservient position. And so to say that we're equal under law, no, absolutely not. On paper you can say that, but how it's implemented and how it's enforced is absolutely about color. And those are the things that we need to change.
It's yeah, it's because just listening to and thinking about because for some folks, that, like you said, like it's like, wow, what's going on? Why all of a sudden? And I mean, part of it. My wife was talking to me about this. The fact that now we have this vehicle to actually shine a light, uh, on it. I'm trying to remember when Reverend Sharpton came. He talked about his role is to turn on the lights and watch the roaches run.
Right.
And so we have social media, we have these cameras, we're documenting stuff, and people are saying like, "Wow, it's happening so much." No, it was always happening.
Been happening. Of
It
course.
happened the day that Columbus landed in the New World. It began. If you read the people, like recently, I had to listen to an audio version, "People's History of the United States" by Howard Zinn, which was actually read by his son, who's an actor.
Okay.
And I remember I was talking about how sometimes when I can't sleep, I listen to audio books. I was listening to that, and it was like basically pumping in a nightmare because his telling talks about just an unbroken stream of atrocities right to the present.
Absolutely.
It's still going on.
Absolutely.
Like the prison industrial complex thing. One of the things that complicates it, I think, for us here at LaGuardia, though, as well, is the fact that you talked about the diversity. We also have a very large population. I forgot what the numbers are, 40 to 60% foreign-born students. Some folks, come to us as adults. This experience that they are watching here in the United States is one that they come from countries where it's not necessarily that way. Let's say race is not the issue. It's another. It's probably something else, but race was not. But here, it is race, as the issue, and so they have this. They don't get it, and the other issue we have is that I mean, it's interesting. Part of the stream started talking about the police union and the role that the union plays in protecting these officers from impunity, as you talked about. We're a highly unionized place here, and there are discussions sometimes about the union's role in defending people. Sometimes that other people might look at and say, they don't necessarily support that, but whatever.
Well,
So
I mean,
it
here's the
complicate.
thing.
There's a lot of complicated issues here.
There certainly are, but when you look at this particular case in Minneapolis,
Right.
murder is murder, whether
Right.
you're unionized or not. Murder is
Yeah.
murder, right? And I give a lot of credit to the police chief who immediately fired them. Was it enough? No. But in listening to him in further interviews, there may have been some things that were out of his hand. I'm not sure. But the fact is that he made a move that was never previously made in these situations. He immediately fired them, and so that I think opened the door for some other things to happen. I give him a lot of credit for that. I give credit to a lot of the police officers at every level across the country who have taken a knee with the protesters. Because here's the reality: the officer who kneeled on the neck of George Floyd was giving a message. He was sending a message. 4 years ago, Colin Kaepernick decided to take a knee to protest this very behavior. And never was he on his knees for 7 to 9 minutes. But the fact that that's what you did, you took a knee on this man's neck, right? You were sending a message. You murdered him, right? I'm sorry, there's no union that can justify that at all. You just cannot justify that. That was completely wrong. But the fact that you have police now who are saying, they're breaking that blue wall, they're kneeling with folks and they're saying this is wrong. That has also never happened. That's progress, right? Because some of the things we don't think about when folks start to condemn police, it's not every police officer who's bad, right? And you have to think about the fact that yes, they're putting their lives on the line every day as well. But there has to be a balance there. Your job is your job, but your humanity is your humanity, right? And cop or not, kneeling on someone's neck till they die is murder, point blank, right? And so those are the kind of things when people start to say, well, no, maybe it could have been something different, so that starts to fuel that rage again, that trauma that we continue to go through. And then it does not help when you have people at the helm who claim that they don't know where certain comments came from, but you want to say, well, hey, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, or we're going to bring out dogs. You know what? You didn't bring that out in any other event. You brought it out when
Right.
there's protests going on for Black folk, and that doesn't help. So to go back to your comment about people from other countries. So the other thing that happens, particularly because we have social media and now news and so forth is so much more global, that people are watching us and they see these things and they see how often in the media Black people and particularly Black males are portrayed a certain way. And so folks come to this country with these preconceived notions about us, and so then they don't understand what's
Us
going
being
on. Us
African Americans.
being Black people, yes. So
Yeah.
then they
Right.
don't necessarily understand historically what's been going on and why we feel the way we feel. And so, the email thread, the person who said it's not about color or it shouldn't be, I responded and said, dissent. Oh, that's fine. Every voice is heard, is valuable, but dissent in fact. And so when that person came back and said, well, I'm not from this country. I'm still learning the language. Maybe I don't quite understand everything. I responded again because I didn't want that person to feel like they were being attacked. Right?
Right.
Your voice is important. The fact that you are even in this conversation helps because you can learn about what's going on. And when we learn more, we do more. So stay in the conversation, right? This is showing your commitment to that. And that's what we need. We need people to start to understand those things. There are still going to be those who don't agree, and that's fine, right? What's not fine is killing us without impunity. I mean, with impunity. That's not fine. But if you disagree, I mean, folks who are saying, no, there's no systemic racism. Okay, I don't know where that person was living. That wasn't on our email thread, but I'm just saying, these are these comments
Connecticut.
happening. These are so-called leaders who were saying there's no systemic racism. Where have you been? You
In the
know,
back of a limousine.
you know, so all of that sort of plays into it, and so it is important for people to learn the history and learn what's going on and why Black people feel the way they do. The thing is, a lot of my research is qualitative because I want people's lived experiences. It's not enough for somebody else to talk about my story, right? Because you cannot give my story the nuance that it has. You can talk about me being angry, but someone else, if you talk about someone else being angry and I'm reading about it, I don't really understand that anger. But if you listen to me and I tell you why I'm angry and what I've been through, you start to get a little bit better understanding. And so that's what it is. That communication, most people talk about communication and they talk about it one way, that we have to effectively use our words and so forth. That's great. But the other part of that is active listening. And that's what a lot of people don't do, right? Listen to what's being said, understand why it's being said, then talk about what can we do together, not what I can do for you.
Very good. Uh, we are moving into the last quarter hour, so this is typically where we open it up to questions and or talk about next steps. And we do have one question from the twitch.com. By the way, folks, if they are listening, you can send in questions through the Twitch stream. It says, in your discussion of trauma, how can educators, particularly non-POC, people of color,
Mhm.
and white educators, best confront this in the classroom in discussions of race, racism, and racial violence, so as not to reinforce trauma or re-traumatize students? That's a good one.
That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, you know, those beginning conversations are going to reinforce that trauma only because in order to talk about it, you're already reinforcing it. So it's sort of the one of the ways to mitigate it is also one of the ways that reinforces it. So it's a little bit difficult. But the fact is, those conversations need to be had because students who are in school may be experiencing racism and bias and trauma in school, but they may have also experienced it on their way to school, right? And so when you have students of color in your classroom who seem as if they have checked out, they're not engaged, they may be dealing with something that they have already experienced, whether it was them personally or in the neighborhood, because what's happening around the world right now is collective trauma. It really is. This just reinforces all of that we already carry every day. So but allowing some space for people to express some of those things that are going on, because uh, your students of color who are the victims of these things are also the ones who are the messengers to the students who may not understand it. I had a colleague, someone I've known for quite a while. We do a lot of work together. I had a colleague tell me the other day that she never thought about being white. Like, she never thought about her privilege. She never thought about it. I said, because you don't have to.
Exactly.
You don't have to. When the whole Black Lives Matter that initiative came about and people started, oh, Blue Lives Matter, da da da. You know, there's no such thing as a blue life. If I'm a police officer and I take off my uniform, you have no idea that I'm a part of that blue line. You just don't. When Wendy walks out the door, Wendy is always a Black woman. I
Right.
can't change that, right? And so, but giving students an opportunity, we need to create not just safe spaces, but brave spaces where people can talk about these things and and have it not be an argument and not be a place where they have to be defensive, but we can begin to learn from each other and about each other, because we all have a story, right? Everybody has a story. So as educators, yes, we need to do several things. Like I said, create a brave space where those conversations can happen, but also in your curriculums, start using scholars who look like your students. It's
Well,
not
Yes,
everything.
and we talk about that in FSOC, right?
Yeah, it has to be. There are black philosophers or Latinx mathematicians, or start using other voices, because other perceptions actually add to the conversation, and it gives your students a goal. Hey, there are people out there who look like me, who've gone through my experiences, who are scholars, who are professionals, whatever. So it gives them something, because we're saying that we're teaching them to do these things, but if we're teaching them from the same perspective, we're doing a disservice to them, because we are now perpetuating, the same ideas that have always been held. So change your pedagogy, change your curriculum, use different voices, because when we are diverse and inclusive, we do learn better.
And I think, it goes back to maybe a comment you made earlier about, because so here we are, two educators of color, uh, and we stand in front of the classroom and they identify with us. But you talked about also, I think about, uh, did we have to adapt to the environment? I mean, do we have to act like academics, speak the academics speak, and stop being our real selves, or whatever you might, or another aspect of myself? When I joke with my students about it, I talk about, like, yeah, when you go to work, you speak job, right? It's different than your vernacular. And in
Right,
fact, I've even asked students to translate
right,
text. And
right,
I say, one of the things you can do is you can translate it into, street talk, whatever, what you say on your stoop, whatever you want to call your
right.
community. And I have seen educators who show up as the genuine self. There's one gentleman, I'm trying to remember, I think he's at, I don't know whether he's City Tech or Medgars, who teaches actually a course on hip hop,
Hmm.
and he speaks in street vernacular.
Right.
And that guy is brilliant. And he talks about the history of rap, from its inception, and where it comes from. As far as the African diaspora, the African American diaspora here in the Western Hemisphere,
Hmm.
and he didn't have to become, some other person. I mean, I think that's something that we struggle with as well. I think I always try to encapsulate in the James Baldwin quote where he says, I fear the black cop more than the white one, because the black cop's got something to prove.
Right.
And so there's a whole nother aspect, which is some of us who, so here we are in this environment where it's predominantly, at least at the professorial level, sometimes it feels like it's predominantly white, male, not so
Hmm.
much at LaGuardia, but
Hmm.
if you look at CUNY, the demographics of it, it
Right.
is the case, 60% white, probably, I don't know if it's also male as well. So that's a struggle for us, is that being our authentic selves and being judged. So I don't know.
And that's part of the trauma, because when you cannot be your authentic self, then who are you? Right. And so, yes, a lot of people of color have gone through this: go to school, get a great education, learn to do these things, and you do it, and then you're told you're wrong for doing it, or you're doing it like someone else, or this, I can't stand this. Why are you trying to sound white? Why are you talking white? Okay, when did white people become the authority on the English language? If I went to school with you and I learned the same thing as you, why is it wrong when I speak it? I learned the same thing as you. If I'm a professor, I've gone to school, I've gotten my doctorate, I do my research, everything that's supposed to be done. But you get these young white students who want to challenge your credentials. Well, how did you get here? How did you become a professor? Well, the same way everybody else did. So why would I be any different just because my skin looks different than yours? I've learned the same thing as you. Right. So learning to navigate that, yeah, it's difficult. And I had a conversation actually with one of my fellow PhD students. I'm actually hoping he's listening. Shout out to you, Kareem. We were talking about this and saying, trying to navigate as we go through our degrees and we're looking towards what's happening after that. Do we need to be careful with the kind of things that we involve ourselves in and the kind of things we speak about, because it may detract from people wanting to hire us or so forth? And but you know what? We have to do it. This is the work that we do. And if we don't do it, it doesn't happen. Right. So we have to be our authentic selves. And you know what? If people don't want to hire us because we speak out, then, maybe we need to create our own stuff. But here again, this is what we've had to do historically. We had to have things because we weren't accepted, but it shouldn't be like that. And so to hear and to read my colleagues or our colleagues here at LaGuardia saying, we stand with you and what can we do? That's the beginning. That's the step, right? So you as a white educator, what do? You make sure that you create those brave spaces in your classroom for students to have these conversations. Make sure you're using other voices. Make sure you look at yourself, analyze yourself and say, hey, where are my biases? Right? Because we all have them, regardless of what we think. The dangerous person is the one who says, no, I don't have any. Don't tell me you don't see color when you look at me. That is not a compliment. And I have a workshop of that name. That is not a compliment because you're negating who I am, right? Tell me that you appreciate me as a person, but don't tell me that you don't see my color. Because my question to you is, do you then see my inside organs? Am I see through that you don't see color? Because that's a problem, right?
Yes. Am I invisible?
Yeah.
Wendy,
Yes,
we're
sir.
pretty much out of time.
This has been awesome. Thank you.
But it's not the end of the conversation.
It can't be.
It can't
It
be.
cannot be.
But I don't know if you want to make any particular shout out, last thanks or anything you want to say. I'll give you this minute to do that if you wish.
Listen, there's so many people, and I don't want to offend, but definitely, the colleagues that I work with here at LaGuardia in the faculty and staff of Color Collective, specifically, Dr. Jason Hendrickson, Dr. Vanessa Bing, Dr. Tuli Chatterjee, uh, Dr. Darren Barini, Stephen Head, Chris McHale. These are all folks that we work with, DEI, Dr. Joy Sanchez Taylor. We work together in trying to build this inclusive environment at CUNY. And so, thank you to you all for working with me and allowing me to be a part of this. To my SPA family, thank you for being here. I had a presentation yesterday, and folks were there on that yesterday too. It was great. And so this is work that needs to happen. It's dirty, it's messy, it's complex, it's complicated. We know that. That's the foundation on which we work. Now, let's go forward, right? So begin to look at people, treat people as humans, treat them with kindness and respect, the same kindness and respect that you want, but have these conversations. Sometimes you need to be the one listening and just deal with the feelings that it brings up. Don't defend, but try to figure out why you have the feelings that you have. And let's continue this conversation because it's going to require a lot of work. Unfortunately, the incident that just happened, or the many incidents that just happened, are going to happen again. It's unfortunate. But if we can work together and work towards building something better, a more inclusive society, we can begin to mitigate those incidences. So let's just do that. And thank you to you, Hugo, for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation on this platform, because it may begin to broaden the work that we do.
And thank you for coming on my show. You've been watching What's Going On the Gordy Radio, WLGR, and my guest has been Wendy Nicholson, a CUNY Leads Advisor in the Center for Career and Professional Development in the Division of Student Affairs, and a doctoral student at Rutgers School of Public Affairs and Administration, who brought to the attention to the college community what's going on with race in this country in her email. The names change, the stories remain the same. So thank you for being my guest. Thanks, folks, for watching. And we'll go out as we came in. Thanks for everything.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you.